don't want to get too much into government rhetoric because it is kind of very fluid right now. But one thing that,
to say the least, yeah,
one thing that I'm seeing a little bit of intervention in is the amortization period. That's something that seems to, you know, I know that before our time too, it's been played with. It's been all the way to 40 years. And is that something you see as needed now? Is it something you see as a solid break to people, or just what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, funny enough, well, I'll start by saying prior to the financial crisis in 2008, I mean, we had 40-year AMs here, States. And a couple of days ago, the FHA, so the Federal Housing Administration in the US, which would be our equivalent to CMHC here in Canada, they just approved 40-year AMs again.
Yeah.
Wow. So, you know, is that, you know, we always say the US moves first.
So is that approved but not rolled out, or is that rolled out as well?
I don't believe it's rolled out yet. I believe it's just approved.
Just been signed off on, though.
Yeah, I literally saw it yesterday.
Okay.
It's funny when I said I was coming in, I'm like, oh, I wonder if you guys are going to ask me about that, and then we can relate. So, what do I think about it? I think it's good because it's going to give an opportunity for first-time home buyers to buy. The longer amortization you can get, the lower the carrying costs on a loan, which makes it more realistic to buy if you have the down payment and the qualification criteria. So I like it. I think what it's going to, you know, turn into is a little bit more of the European model of you may not pay down your house in your life,
but you'll have
but your family will inherit the property. That's going to be a much smaller population will be homeowners.
Yeah.
Or investment property owners. So instead of collapsing a portfolio of properties later in life to consolidate, I think there'll be more of redistributing property assets throughout your family if you have that. And maybe your children inheriting a mortgage that's not paid off. So I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable that we're going to have longer amortization periods.
That's going to be what you're using and looking at too. That can't be ignored later on if you're trying to make that investment purchase down the road. You are looking at the fact that we stretched this out as far as we can and that kind of thing. So because the income wasn't quite there, that doesn't just go away. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, you'll pay the insurance premium,
right,
blended into the mortgage and then amortized over however many years you get. But it allows people to buy a property with less down payment.
Exactly, yeah.
And then lower carrying costs, which is very important because right now with where interest rates are, even, an average income earner who qualifies, has the cosigner or has the down payment, the carrying costs are a huge concern because you have to factor in property taxes, possibly maintenance fees if it's a condo property. Anyone who owns a home knows that there's costs around a property that are always coming up and expensive. So, leveling out that payment, even if the amortization is long, allows people to get in. And then on top of that, you can always prepay it faster, right?
Right.
Like all of these mortgage products come with a lump sum prepayment privilege, typically ranging between 15% to 25% of the original loan amount that you can prepay once per calendar year.
And
that goes directly to principal.
Open and closed, if you'll touch on. So if you're looking up these products, not too many people, like if you're looking at a closed mortgage, right?
Yeah, they're all predominantly closed.
Yeah.
They're all considered closed within the term. Like in the States, they have a lot of 30-year terms. In Canada, we have a standard 5-year term. Can also get 1 to 5 years.
Right.
But predominantly speaking, we live in a lot of 2 to 5 year terms.
Yeah.
But within that term, you can always pay down right to principal. And what that does is it will shrink the amortization period.
Yeah.
So if you come into money or make more money years down the road, you can always shrink the original amortization. So I always say to people, don't get scared about the amortization.
Yeah.
Get into the market.
Yes.
Like understand how difficult it is to do that.
If you have a glimpse, if you have a glimpse of an opportunity and you're worried it's going to go away, it's a time to get in, especially, I'm not going to get too deep into this because it's so fresh, but as the government does look at breaks for people, does look at penalty breaks, does look at mortgage discharge breaks and that kind of thing. Are we going to see the stress test change? Probably not. I think it is to protect people at the end of the day. I think we all, you know, everyone can say it sucks, this, that, and the other, and be negative about it. But I think it does protect more people than it hurts. But yeah, so I think get into the market while you can. Right?
What do you think about the potential of the stress test changing though if amortization periods do go longer? Because then you're gonna have a lot of these guys right now that have the 5 and 10 rental units go perfect. And what are we trying not to do in Niagara Falls and a lot of the follow places in Ontario? So it's like, okay, yeah, let's increase that now. So you have to pay less. Everyone goes perfect. The guy who's got 5 lots already, 5 rental units goes perfect. And then everyone goes, oh, by the way, rates are at rent rates at an all-time high.
Yeah, they are looking at that
so
right now,
there's
though, as we speak.
We got to find
and every
the balance.
community seems to have this issue.
We got to find the balance.
Finding the balance is hard. And I mean, we need more housing units. I mean, if you look at data is data. And when you look at, you know, the trajectory we have for immigration.
Yeah.
This was the first year over 1 million that we've brought in.
These are some big numbers, right? And I work with a lot of permanent residents, so new PRs to Canada.
Right.
And obviously it's, you know, probably not the majority of people coming, but let me tell you, a lot of people that are coming to Canada, they're excited to be here. They're educated. They have good employment. And if they come with $50,000 to $100,000 to $150,000 of savings, they want to buy property.
Yeah.
And they want to get into the market. They want to be homeowners. And so it's not like a lot of immigrants are coming to Canada and then just being renters.
Right.
Like a lot of these people are getting their permanent residency and then they're, you know, getting in touch with mortgage brokers and banks and getting pre-approved to buy property in whatever city they want or land in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially those, we're not really talking about asylum seekers in this case, but especially those coming over, you know, the slow and steady way and gaining their PR and gaining their citizenship over time. Canada is analyzing who's coming over in those scenarios.
We are talking about permanent residents of Canada right now.
Yeah.
We are not talking about someone who's out here on a work visa.
No.
Yeah.
Just keeping that wide out in the open. These are people that are Canadian citizens that are buying homes.
And to answer your previous question, not answer it, but to expand it a little bit, I do think it would be interesting, I'll just say, if for whatever reason the government were to take off the stress test at the same time as providing breaks on mortgages for those in distress. I think that's two different ends of the spectrum, and I think that's not two things you can have going on at the same time.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the stress test.
Yeah.
I think where the stress test has become very daunting is with the increase in interest rates across the board.
Right.
That stress test has just gotten to a level now where really good income earners are struggling to get pre-approved for purchases. And so when interest rates were living in the 2-3%, and then the stress test is, you know, was sitting around, you know, 5.25% for a long time, I thought it was great. It provided enough of a layer of stress testing to ensure that the borrowers would be able to pay and have a little bit of room. The distressed situation of certain individuals, what the banks seem to be doing right now is extending amortizations out if you are in distress. So if you're somebody who can't afford your payment, from what I'm gathering through the grapevine, is that, you know, the banks are willing to help Canadians as much as they can. And if you're sitting at a 27-year AM, they might say, hey, we'll move you to 35 or 40 years, which lowers the payment, keeps you in the bank's silo for a lot longer, which I think is always a win for them. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you know, people can hate banks all you want. They're not in the business to take your home.
Well, and also
they don't want to be selling off foreclosures. They want.
Where else are you getting money that cheap? Like at the end of the day, where else are you getting people? Like we can villainize them sometimes, but let's just say we're on we purchased a $750,000 house at 4.64. Like where else are you getting access to $750,000 for 4.64%? You're not. That's right. Not in any. You'd have to have quite the business acumen and quite the revenue to get a business loan like that. Like I mean, like it's just there's not another avenue really for the average Canadian. I dropped down from a UFO. I know nothing of what's going on. I ask you, who is the right, like who makes an easy purchase and who is 2023, this buying condition, rates, who is this right for?
So I'm a firm believer of not focusing too much on the interest rate right now.
Okay.
I mean, the general consensus is that interest rates are likely to come down at some point a little bit.
Mhm.
I think the days of seeing 1.5 to 2% rates are not going to be coming back. And frankly, I don't think they're good to have back, because it created a very lopsided environment.
Yeah.
So interest rates will retreat a little bit, likely within the next 12 months.
And do you think, sorry to cut you off, do you think the 1 to 2 time period, do you think that kind of lent itself to the stress test coming in as things got that low, right?
Yeah, I think it was always tied to inflation.
Yeah.
So as we see inflation come down, I mean, the housing market stayed quite resilient.
Yeah.
And, you know, this Jan, Feb, and March has been very interesting statistics from the top of the market in February of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a resilient market in a lot of different areas, not just Toronto. You know, the low-rise market in the GTA has such low inventory right now that we're back to 15 to 25 offers on a property.
Wow.
I mean, the last 2 weeks I've seen more times I can count on one hand client situations where there are 15 to 25 offers. So a lot of buyers that were waiting in the wind out of fear, out of just wanting to see the dust settle, I think they've realized the material risk of rates continuing to go up is more or less gone.
Right.
Are we going to sit here for a period of time and flutter up 25 bips, down 25 bips? Maybe. But now it's kind of like, well, and this kind of leads to my answer to your question. The right person is someone who can get qualified and is comfortable with that carrying cost relative to today's interest rate. And we're doing a lot of deals right now on 3-year fixed terms, 2-year fixed terms, paying a little bit of a premium compared to a 5-year, and the variable is really high right now. But it's like, hey, if this is the property you and your family want to move into, or this is an investment property, and you're comfortable with this payment, get in, and in a couple of years, let's recalibrate what options you may have. And it's very likely, none of us have the crystal ball, very likely to be a better mortgage product available to you, but get in. So if you can qualify and you're comfortable with the carrying costs, I think anyone should buy right now. And I think it's not discussed enough about the importance of being able to gap up. Okay. So not everyone buys their first home or second home as a place they're going to be for 15 years. But if you don't get in the market, it becomes extremely hard to outsave the market by somewhat of a conservative investment strategy. So I'm not talking about a crypto investor or someone who's super savvy in the stock market where they can make way more appreciation on their money than a real estate investment. I'm talking about someone that's protecting a down payment of some sort and they want to continue to grow it, but they're going to have to keep it at a conservative level to not destroy what they have. So if you get into the market and you watch your property appreciate a little bit over the years and you're paying down principal, you create that equity gap. Right. Now, all of a sudden, when you want to gap up, your family grows, you're taking in parents, whatever, you want to move to a different city, you want a bigger house. The idea of gapping up at that point is so much easier. And it's just not talked about enough, because people who think, well, I'll just keep renting, 5 years goes by and they realize that they have no equity they've built, and their, capital market portfolios are creeping up a little bit, or they have a bad year and pull back. They have no principal pay down. They're paying rent somewhere else, and they have no property appreciation. So I see it every single day in my business. The people gapping up are because they got in the market. Yeah.
And you mentioned a bit more competition you're noticing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a little bit more entry level and mid. And I think there's some buyers right now that they can see some opportunities that they couldn't before, with a little bit less activity at that upper echelon, not the peak of it all, but let's just say in Niagara, we'll say the 850s to 1.3s, and in Toronto, we'll say the 1.8s to 2.2s. A little bit less activity, a little bit less maybe gapping up there.
Opportunity because of less competition,
right? Because of less competition,
and the gapping up's becoming very difficult for that cohort, let's call it, because of all the things we talked about, income levels, a little bit of fear, a little bit of qualification issues. So condition of financing, maybe you can get on properties like that. You can, negotiate a good deal. You might find a seller that needs to sell and doesn't want to linger around for 4 months on the market.
And we're finally outside of a time where there wasn't really a non-competitive property for a little while, right? So if there's low interest, if you're seeing these, maybe realtor terms, but you hear them too, but if you're seeing 130 days on market, if you're seeing a little bit tough to sell, and You know, it's not always
A
because
price
there's
reduction or two.
Yeah, it's not always because there's something wrong with that house. It's just they're probably sitting in a category with a little less purchase option, a little bit harder to purchase, a little bit harder to gap up. So there's opportunity there that before we know it could be gone again. And I'm not sitting there pressuring people jump on, but are we going to kick ourselves when, like, I think of clients of mine and they purchase at 1.1. And I can promise you in 3 years, they're not going to have a new neighbor that didn't purchase at 1.6 or higher.
But that's the thing, though. A lot of that comes down to us, though, as the realtors, to be able to actually do our job with that sense of due diligence, to be able to acknowledge those type of things. Some people might not.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a way of being like some realtors are bad. It's not about that. But you just have to be able to work with the data that we're given at times in the same way that you are, and just be able to see that those moves are historically made often in the same ways that they're being presented in front of you, right? So
yeah, and I think we got into a little bit of a weird environment over the last 5 years where you heard your buddy that bought a house and then 2 years later it went up 100 G's.
yeah.
And they're like, it's like, oh, and then people started spec buying or, you know, investment property. And the reality is like, okay, we went through a cool cycle. If you were on the right side of it, congratulations.
Yeah.
You know, you made some money, you made it faster than your friends and family. But at the end of the day, every real estate acquisition should be looked at with a 5+ year outlook.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you feel comfortable to buy this property, you like the property, you have the qualification capability, you're comfortable with the carrying costs, whatever that means to your qualification, why are you waiting? Like, do you really believe 5 years from now, property, like even if property values came down another 15% in the next 2 years, 5 years from now, between the principal paid on that property and the recalibration of the appreciation, you don't think you're going to be further ahead?
Right.
No, 100%.
I do. I mean, that's an opinion.
Yeah.
But when I look at the mortgage products and the principal pay down, and then relative to the cost of rent in so many markets, not just Toronto, not just Niagara Falls, not just Kitchener, not just Barrie, not Vancouver, like there's low vacancy in so many markets for good rental products. And the reality is
Across
that
the country,
so many potential borrowers with good jobs, where we would consider a good job, cannot buy.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? Well, they have to rent.
I think there's a lot of assumptions there. And that's why I think like that little step into that, like there's a lot of people that you'd be surprised cannot buy.
Yeah.
In this
No,
market.
I'm aware of it.
And no, not you, sorry. not Chris, not Isaac, but I think people stepping in and go ahead and put in your doctor's salary and their partner who's a lawyer and add that up. And it's less, it computes to less than you might think, you know. And the one thing I wanted to talk about was a notice of mine, and one thing I liked about a little bit more of the, let's call it, just at least longer days on market, a little bit more stable conditions, right? Having conditions in a deal and that kind of thing is great. But we have noticed a trend of turnkey homes. And I think that maybe that gets away from some of that quick flip mentality and maybe a little bit more buyer's trust. I don't know if the trend's there in the Toronto area, if you're noticing that with some of your approvals, but I'm finding that some of way more, I think we talked about this with some of your clients, Isaac, is just if we can get this into a turnkey piece, the interest will build. And a lot of the non-turnkeys, for those of you, I'll just quickly, turnkey is opening the door and not changing much of anything.
The home's, you know, taken care of, designed properly, upgrades done.
Yeah, so we're just seeing that push there, and I think I'm hopeful that it gets a little bit away. It takes away from some of the quick flips and that.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Yeah,
absolutely seeing that, especially in that that age group between 30 and 45, and then also in the age group of 60 to 75. So you have the gap up buyers or first time home buyers who are busy with their work lives, busy with kids if they have them, busy with their social lives, and they aren't good with their hands. We're
and
very
possibly working at home.
Our generation
now too, right?
is very poor, handy people. Okay, so you know, cost of materials, cost of trades, living with a renovation is no fun. If you displace yourself, you know, do you want to move back in with family? Can you even do that?
Right.
It becomes a hassle. So when interest rates were lower, people said, well, why would I want to save an extra 200 grand on the side for renovations with this unknown number and result when I could just buy this brand new house or fully renovated house, put my down payment down, stick the rest in an amortized mortgage, make the monthly payment, and move on with my life. And you're starting to see that a lot more. And so those two age groups are becoming very, very prevalent in who's dominating that space. So the downsizers are selling that home they've lived in for 20, 30 years, mortgage free most often than not.
And they want the next one to be ready to go.
Yeah, and whether it's a
and why wouldn't
condo,
you?
a condo or a bungalow, they are not about to go do a full renovation. I mean, if you come from a construction background, let's put those people to the side.
Yeah.
But more often than not, they're downsizing to a turnkey property.
Yeah.
And then in the age groups between 30 and 45, if you are someone very busy and dedicated to your work life and you have the ability to qualify for the mortgage, you are very likely going to focus your efforts more on a turnkey, something new, and something fully renovated.
So you heard it from Chris. We agree. Yeah, turnkey seems to be more attractive. Now it's I remember in Niagara, it was like this thing where the seniors were looking for bungalows, and all of a sudden the younger people were like, well, I like that too. And then everybody needed a bungalow. It was funny. It was odd, right? But the same thing we're saying here is that turnkey made sense for somebody that was not good with their hands or older and retired and that kind of thing. But now, you know, working from home, the influence there, and just really doing your best to afford a home with higher interest rates, it's going to have you pretty busy and your family life pretty busy. So turnkey makes sense there. So really a lot of our market is hoping for turnkey. We
got one last question probably because we're going to have to wrap it up. So next 10 to 20 years, there were a few reports that we were reading that they were going to say that the average household salary in Toronto to afford a home is going to be around $400,000. Do you think that there's any actual meat and potatoes that's inside of that statement, or do you think that things could change in the time that between the 10 and 20 years that we're looking at? Because average person would see the 400,000 and probably have a heart attack. Yeah. So ease them if you will, make them scared if you will.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that idea. But I mean, generally speaking, if you were looking for, you know, a detached home in Toronto or even a semi-detached home with the trajectory that Toronto is growing and the GTA, I mean, if qualification metrics stay where they are and you want to put 20 or 25% down, because the one thing about qualification, it's not all just your income. There's the big three, I always call it. The income we can use on the file, what down payment are you putting down, and then what debt are we factoring in? So there's three items that will derive the model. So if you say someone wants to buy a $3 million house, but they're putting $2 million down, well, you're not going to need a $400,000 income to qualify for that. So if you're looking to put 20, 25% down, and we're 10 years from now where I believe Toronto's going to be, like I think we're fully on a trajectory of heading towards New York City.
Yeah.
I am extremely bullish on all things Toronto, all things GTA, and all things Southern Ontario. And the impact of, if Toronto continues to get to that level, urban sprawl. Yeah. And urban sprawl is going to continue to benefit every smaller city outside of Toronto. And I love it because obviously I grew up in Niagara Falls, so I know it well. I've seen the market grow here like crazy. I still have a lot of good friends that I keep in touch with here. And I just think it's going to empower more communities to grow within. So like you've seen Kitchener, Waterloo, like that's going to be a great little tech hub. Awesome, right? Yeah. Barrie, like like you're going to see, instead of looking at Niagara region as Niagara Falls and St. Catharines, look at the spread now, right? Yeah. And
it's all going to be Niagara.
Better restaurants, better entertainment, better everything. Because what happens with urban sprawl is a lot of talent gets moved around.
Spread around, yeah.
So you start to see, like, look at Hamilton, right? You know, a lot of people use the term of Hamilton may be the Brooklyn of Toronto one day. Long way to go, but there's towers going up. There's already a food scene. There's a brewery scene. There's an entertainment scene. And why that restaurant scene started 5 years ago is because chefs and people that couldn't afford to live in Toronto said, well, I need to move. So where do they go? They go to places like Hamilton and Kitchener, Waterloo, and Niagara Falls. And all of a sudden you see this new restaurant pop up that's like, this is super New York, Toronto, LA.
Exactly,
How
yeah.
did this
Yeah.
get here?
Yeah.
Well, it was an entrepreneur who, you know, got moved
And you're
out.
saying I'm not that far, right?
100%.
I'm not that far, so why not? And let's make it. Let's see if it works. You know, because if you have a good amount of capital, but it's not enough for downtown Toronto and the needs there and the lease and that kind of thing. But you take like Matty Matheson over here, has had a great run with Rizzo's House of Parm in Fort Erie, in Ridgeway, Fort Erie area, right? And booked every night for the last
Because
6 months,
he's
right?
a chef with a great reputation
Yeah.
from Toronto. He's obviously done well on TV, but his skill set is something that the Niagara region didn't see
Yep.
as often.
And it's not that far.
And then he comes here
They'll
with his
drive.
unique ideas, and all of a sudden, everyone in these smaller towns, let's say, don't need to go to Toronto
Yep.
to get that meal or
Exactly.
experience. And that's what's going to happen more of.
I think
you
I
see.
totally agree. I totally agree with you. Because think about it this way too. You want to drive from one end of LA to the next, it's going to take you 2.5 hours.
Exactly.
So that's going to take you 2.5 hours, but I can
Shout
make
out
it to
LA
Toron-
traffic.
right? Honestly, 8 lanes deep, and I'm still screaming at the car. But like, you know what I mean? Though that could be a 2.5 hour drive.
Yeah.
And now we're discussing having all of this new sprawl and business development in all forms of different markets coming here within an hour and 45. I'll put it at that.
And eventually you hope to get to like this is our urban sprawl identity and like niche and like come to Hamilton for this, not that. Come to, you know what I mean? You kind of get these boroughs almost. You mentioned New York, right? You get these boroughs of what they're offering, right?
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it'll be culturally diverse.
Mhm.
It'll be, you know, super rich in culture of food.
And they won't spare
entertainment.
expenses, right?
No.
Because they're not spending all of their money on their commercial lease.
And that's why like all of Southern Ontario will benefit from
Mm-hmm.
this, because Toronto will continue to get more expensive, and so will everywhere else in all relativity.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's going to come to a point where, you know, someone who, if you look at New York, well, I can't afford to buy an apartment or a house in New York. I need to look in, you know, Long Island or Queens or, you know, west in the Jersey side,
Yeah.
maybe 45 minutes away, which is essentially Niagara,
Yeah.
Grimsby,
really is.
Erie,
Yeah.
Guelph.
People never think about it that way.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Ever,
And
man.
I think, you know, Toronto continuing to be a very attractive place for business, global living will only
Yeah.
benefit the rest of the province and other provinces
Yeah.
and the country. It's a trickle down effect.
For sure.
It really is.
For sure.
I'm gonna leave it on that note, Chris, because I love the positivity and the optimism. Next time you're on, I think we're gonna have to dice up a few changes that are coming in and affecting our market because they're happening daily. But yeah, having you on is fantastic.
Thank you, man. It's been great.
You're such a
I appreciate
resource. You know, if we can all sponge from each other in our you know, in our respective careers, we're set to learn. And I think that having these conversations are so important. And hopefully we both took something from each other's standpoint. here today.
Absolutely. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure. You guys
I
are
loved
a
it,
lot
man.
of fun to
Loved it,
have
man.
a conversation with, and hopefully we'll do it again.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.